Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring you today's most pressing issues from across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. North Korea has issued its first direct criticism of the second Trump administration, blasting the remarks made by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who labeled the regime a rogue state. In a statement via its state media, North Korea condemned Rubio's comments as a grave political provocation, reaffirming its rejection of U.S. hostility. The regime warned of tough counteraction, citing its longstanding stance of resistance to U.S. provocations. While President Trump has continuously been expressing interest in re-engaging with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, prospects of diplomatic talks seem uncertain, as North Korea has instead emphasized strengthening its nuclear shield in response to external threats. As tensions continue to rise, experts are analyzing what the latest development means for Washington-Pyongyang relations and the broader security landscape. For this, we invite into the studio Dr. Kim Mok-yeon, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for National Security Strategy with us. Welcome.
Good to be back in Seoul.
And also joining us from Washington, D.C. is Joseph Detrani, former Special Envoy of the U.S. for six-party talks. Great to have you with us.
Nice being here.
So yeah, welcome back, Dr. Go.
Thank you. Thank you.
So considering, all the remarks made by Trump on North Korea, there was a criticism by North Korea for the first time on the Trump administration. Do you think it was solely due to the remarks made by Rubio? How do you read into this?
So clearly, each package does feature response to Secretary Rubio's remark criticizing the North Korean regime. But I think overall, it's a part of the North Korean strategy to probe the Trump administration to figure out who's advocating which position or approach towards North Korea. I think President Trump has been very consistent in praising North Korean leader Kim Jong-un all this time, ever since, during the office in the first term, as well as after he left office in 2020, and then continuously during the electoral campaign trail. Last year, President Trump has been praising Kim, and then clearly this is meant to send a positive signal to North Korea to re-engage in dialogue once Trump returns to the White House. But I think North Koreans got that message from Trump, but then at the same time, they remember the past. They remember how the previous effort to engage in the United States or have dialogue with the United States ultimately failed not because of President Trump himself, or maybe because of him, but mostly probably they blamed President Trump's national security advisors. So last time was clearly national security advisor John Bolton, and this time around, I think the North Koreans can figure out that President Trump again is surrounded by some hardliners. The National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, is the former Green Beret, and then he's well-known, has a very strict, very more traditional view of North Korea as a threat, and cannot really accept North Korea as a nuclear state. Secretary Rubio, for his long career in the U.S. Senate, has been also very consistent, but this time criticizing North Korea. He never trusts a dictatorship like North Korea's Kim Jong-un regime. So I think we see divergent views within the administration. I think North Korea wants to elicit reactions, probably from President Trump himself. If President Trump comes with a remark that in fact contradicts what Secretary Rubio said about them, then I think North Korea will take that as a signal that again President Trump is putting weight on engaging North Korea rather than trying to sugarcoat the messaging so that they distract the North Koreans from engaging provocations, or even, God forbid, another nuclear test. So I think this is a communication strategy on the part of North Korea. It doesn't mean essentially a rejection of the dialogue effort that President Trump is putting on the table.
Right, so they're still looking into the message from
Exactly.
the Trump administration. Now, to Ambassador Detrani, how significant do you think this kind of shift to North Korea's rhetoric towards the United States compared to its previous instances of diplomatic exchanges?
Well, I think it's very significant. I think we're dealing with a different Kim Jong-un. I think we're dealing with a different North Korea. This is a Kim Jong-un who feels emboldened, who has China and Russia protecting North Korea at the United Nations Security Council. I think he feels, and now that he's sent troops into even helping Russia in Kursk in the Russian Federation, I think this is a different Kim Jong-un. And I think we have to realize that. So if we're planning on renegotiating with Kim Jong-un, we should be realistic. Realistic enough to say he's emboldened now. He feels very good about himself, what he's done on his nuclear missile capabilities, his alignment with China and Russia, and I might add his work with Iran and assistance to the proxies, Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. So we've seen a different North Korea over the past year, and now with the Mutual Defense Treaty with the Russian Federation, I think we're dealing with a different North Korea. And I think we have to realize that. It's not going back to where we were 6 years ago, 5 years ago. It's realizing where we are in 2025. And that is a position that I feel Kim Jong-un feels very good about, renegotiating with a stronger and a more supportive North Korea, especially by its allies, China and Russia.
And probably because of that reason, North Korea has indicated it will answer military threats with military power, a tit-for-tat move. What could this mean, Ambassador? How does this stance affect international security as well?
You know, a good question. Look, I think we see very clearly what he's done with the Hwasong-19, an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach the whole of the United States. He's done this with hypersonics. He's building up his nuclear weapons capabilities. It's obvious that North Korea, and again, he says it, Kim Jong-un is very open about what he's doing on his nuclear program. Yes, Pyongyang is there. He's working on the economy and hoping to get the economy in better shape because it is not in good shape. But the nuclear side, the missile side, the illicit side that supports the nuclear and the leadership, if you will, those are in good shape. So I think we'll see North Korea working on its missile defense, its hypersonics, his intercontinental ballistic missile, the Hwasong-19, and follow-on systems to make it very clear to the United States, to South Korea and the world, North Korea now is a nuclear power, and it's becoming even more of a nuclear power.
Now, in the wake of these comments, Ambassador, what do you foresee for the future of U.S.-North Korea relations? Do you think there's any room for negotiation? Or Dr. Go has mentioned they're still not flatly rejecting Trump's offer. What's your idea?
No, I totally agree with Dr. Go. I think there is room for renegotiations with North Korea. I think, but we have to be bold. We just can't go in and go in with the same playbook where we talk about, lifting. Well, we'll look at lifting certain sanctions. North Korea is looking for a bold move on the part of the United States, given the reality of where they are with China and Russia and their nuclear missile programs. They're looking for sanctions relief, the lifting of sanctions. They're looking for a peace treaty. They're looking for a path to normalize relations with the United States, economic development assistance. Yes, it's actions for actions, but it's got to be more upfront. And I think the United States has to be realistic in this way. Because I think if we have the first meeting with Kim Jong-un and he hears the same things we've been putting on the table for the past 16 years and certainly the past 5 years with the Hanoi summit, it's not going to work.
Right, so a different kind of approach would be necessary with the second, second Trump's term with North Korea now. Now let's move on to the North Korean soldier presence in the Russia-Ukraine war. Dr. Go, South Korea's spy agency says there are signs that North Korean forces have ceased active combat for several weeks now. Do you think it's a temporary strategy, or does this signal some, deeper problems within?
Probably, essentially that established the cause and effect here. I think a North Korean deployment to Russia, the Kursk, which is the front line right now between Ukraine and Russia, has become problematic for the regime. I think they probably experienced very, very high level of casualties. I think a lot of experts, in fact, expected this to happen to the North Korean soldiers in Ukraine because the war between Ukraine and Russia right now is very intense, and then the form of warfare that we see there is very, I would say, in a way, outdated. Essentially, we are talking about the First World War type of trench warfare, which signifies very high level of casualties. And North Koreans went in there without much preparation, so it was obviously natural for them to experience a very high level of casualties. So there are some analysis indicate that North Koreans could run out of their own manpower by April at this rate of casualties. So it's possible that the North Koreans are reassessing the way they're engaging the Ukrainian forces right now, probably rearrange the command structure or how they cooperate with the Russians. So I think this is the reason why they're taking a break, so to speak. But it doesn't mean that North Korea retreat from the battleground. I think Kim Jong-un is very committed in assisting Russia. I think it really serves the messaging that North Korea has been sending last year or so, that North Korea and Russia are together in the trenches. So in order to live up to that statement, Russia is likely to follow this, not with retreat or like a downscaling the presence in the battleground, but rather they're probably going to reinforce the forces with further deployment. So I think President Zelensky of Ukraine has mentioned that he expects North Korea to send perhaps another 2 divisions worth of soldiers, probably 20,000 soldiers. But still, that's going to be, in a grand scheme of things, given how intense the battle is right now, I think it's going to be a drop in the bucket, and then North Korea again will face the dilemma of running out of manpower. And that's going to be a dilemma that Russians also share right now.
Right, so North Koreans are running out of manpower, and but they're still willing to help Russia in the future. Now, but we are aware that North Korea is indeed having lots of losses in terms of soldiers. Do you think, what kind of impact does this have on the regime itself? Like, so many soldiers from there are dying.
Well, the North Korea is not a normal regime. We know this. North Korea has been, so in a nutshell, I think it's not going to affect the regime at all. So it's a shocking thing to say, especially in the areas of the international community. But that's what North Korea is. North Korea has suffered a massive casualties from the famine in the 90s that didn't really lead to the regime collapse. Again, the famine was happening in North Korea in a localized manner before Russia started to help North Korea with economic assistance, so payment in kind for North Korea's supply of weapon system to Russians in the ongoing war in Ukraine. So North Korean regime can put up with a high level of casualties, both in the social dimension as well as in the military dimension. And also, I don't think the North Korean regime would want to see that many soldiers to survive this war, because once they come back to North Korea, they'll bring back to North Korea about their really intense and negative experience of fighting for the regime, in fact for nothing. And they also have this common shared experience in the battleground that creates a cohesive unit for the repatriated soldiers that could represent a form of threat to the regime viability going forward. So chances that the North Korean regime would like to expand the soldiers as many as possible. So we have to view the logic of the North Korean deployment from the perspective of the regime itself, from the perspective of how the deployment helps the regime survival, rather than the North Korea as a country. So, if from that perspective, the North Korean regime couldn't care less about these soldiers' lives. It only asked the glory, or in a way, essentially asked to the bill that the North Koreans are going to put on the table to ask the Russians for payment. So, in that sense, I think a North Korean regime, Kim Jong-un himself, is not batting an eye about these casualty numbers, which are staggering.
Well, in that context, cooperation between Russia would continue.
Exactly.
Now, we hear that a joint motorway bridge project linking North Korea and Russia across Human River is underway, with completion targeted by the end of 2026. Ambassador, how significant will this infrastructure be for enhancing trade and economic exchanges between North Korea and Russia?
I think it will be very significant. And I think we're seeing that now. But with this bridge, I think North Korea is now relying on Russia to provide it with the food aid and certainly the satellite assistance and nuclear assistance, but also with the normal trade, energy assistance, etc. So with that, with Russia there, and with this bridge and enhanced trade with Russia, given that they have China as a major supporter, economic supporter of North Korea, I think they're feeling very good. I think this is Kim Jong-un's view that we can go it alone. We don't need the United States. We don't need the Republic of Korea. And I think he's made that very clear in the Constitution, saying the primary enemies are the United States and the Republic of Korea. So I think we have a long ways to go with North Korea, given the inroads he's made, especially with the Russian Federation.
Right. So cooperation between the two sides are definitely getting closer. Now, we also hear that North Korea would be willing to accept tourists from China beginning February, and the regime before has opened tourists only from Russia. Dr. Go, how much do you think this would affect North Korea's economy, and could you tell us about the situation there in terms of economy?
So sure, clearly, as Ambassador Chani has pointed out earlier, the economic situation in North Korea is pretty dire, but it's in many ways just self-inflicted wound on the part of the regime. These are the consequences of the regime's policy of re-centralizing the economy by getting rid of the market system. North Korean people have depended on the market, the private markets, for their livelihoods ever since the economy collapsed in the 90s. But then Kim Jong-un, by an act of fiat, wants to reverse this and then essentially reimpose the very inefficient state control of the economy. And the consequences are that people are suffering economically with lack of food and all that. So North Korea is in a situation to earn back the money, the income that they have lost due to sanctions, due to they being less engaging with the outside world, especially with China and Russia. So one of the ways to recoup the losses by reopening the country to tourism. So North Korea has done that to Russian tourists earlier, but then the potential pool of the Russian tourists in North Korea is very small. North Korea, Russians, most of the bulk of the Russian population live in the European side of Russia, and they are not that interested in North Korea. They, in fact, detest North Korea. It doesn't really they don't fancy visiting North Korea at all. They're afraid their country will become like North Korea in the future. But China is a different story. China is right next door, and the pool of potential tourists from China is enormous, obviously. They have a population of 1.4 billion. So in that, and also there's apparently some, I would say, positive memories of the Mao era, when they see this replicated in still preserved in North Korea. So there's this, I would say, this kind of interest in the part of the Chinese society. So and in fact, the bulk of tourists to North Korea, foreign tourists to North Korea, have been Chinese before the onset of the pandemic in 2020. So, and then North Korea made tens of millions of dollars from their revenue, but then each one of the Chinese tourists doesn't really represent much of a revenue because many of them happen to be day tourists, day trippers from the border regions. So, but that's still a lot of money for North Korea at this moment. So they would love to rebuild the revenue stream as soon as possible. So even though the relationship between China and North Korea is not at the zenith or any better than before, I think North Koreans are opening up the country to Chinese tourists for pragmatic and financial reasons.
Mm-hmm. Right. So hearing all this, it seems to be some, good news for North Korean economy, tourism, and also building the bridge. And the regime, in fact, is still under global sanctions. Ambassador, should we be concerned about the regime's economy recovering and, also further developing its nuclear weapons with the money they've been earning?
Well, I think with the economy improving, because there is food scarcity, significant malnourishment in North Korea. So I think on that side, a humanitarian approach, a humanitarian view is positive. They should. And indeed, that was the whole impetus, or part of the impetus, for getting North Korea back to negotiation. So they will get economic development assistance, not only security assurances, but economic development assistance, and their economy will improve because those sanctions are biting, and they do need sanctions relief. So yes, I think that is positive on the economic side, but more is available to North Korea if they come back to negotiations. No. On the missiles and nuclear side, no. It is dangerous. What North Korea is doing now with the Hwasong-19, what they're doing with hypersonics, building more nuclear weapons, and the possibility of proliferation of those nuclear weapons and fissile material. I think that is not heartening. That is dangerous. And I personally fear that an emboldened North Korea now could cause some conflict on the Korean Peninsula against the Republic of Korea. We saw this in 2010 with the Chung-an incident. 46 South Korean sailors were perished when the North Koreans used their, if you will, a submarine to attack a frigate from South Korea, so they could incite conflict. And I think this is a real possibility, and that's another reason why I believe we need to come back to negotiations.
Right. So returning to the negotiating table is definitely important in this context. We have a lot of things to discuss, but I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up our discussion at this point. Ambassador Detrani, thank you so much for your insights tonight.
Thank you.
And also Dr. Go, of course.
My pleasure.
That'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.